What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and today's video is going to be examining Hellion, a character many of us thought was bad, especially in the first couple days of the game, but turns out she might be one of the best characters in the game, if not even potentially the best, even with Plague Doctor existing. Before we get started, of course, as always, if you're enjoying the video, give it a thumbs up, leave your thoughts down below in the comments. Make sure to check out the description box for all the cool links like Discord, Twitter, Twitch, and Patreon, especially Twitch, where I stream 4 days a week. If you want to buy the game yourself, I have an Epic Game Store code. It is Shuffle in all caps, like I said, down below. If you want to use it, thank you. So I know that's a pretty bold claim to say that Hellion might be one of the best, especially with Plague Doctor. The reason is I think Plague Doctor is going to get the nerf hammer at some point in early access, but I don't really see it coming for Hellion, at least not as strongly as Plague Doctor. The reason many of us thought Hellion was not that good before was because she didn't have her massive damage stat from the first game. She was hitting for 4 to 8 like pretty much everyone else. And her first moves are just damage, and for some reason If It Bleeds is a very weak version of Slice Off. However, Hellion is one of the characters that gets the biggest glow up once she gets all of her buttons from her backstory stuff, so if you like Hellion and you think she's a bit weak, make sure to do those shrines with her, get all of her buttons, and then you'll be surprised at how good she actually is. The first button we have to look at is Raucous Revelry. This is very akin to, I think it was just called Revel in the first game. It was one of her camp skills where she just gets drunk with the party, and that's a great stress healing camp skill. But in this game, there is no camping. So Revelry in battle just means Hellion gets to drink on the job, and everyone gets a bunch of stress reduction for it. It's a move that can heal at least one stress off of the rest of your party members, and then more than one off of Hellion just by itself. But even after that, it has a cooldown of 1 turn, so you can use it quickly compared to Ounce of Prevention. It's more consistent than Bolster, and it also heals Hellion on top of it at the cost of a Winded token. Those of you unaware, Winded is a condition that Hellion gives herself off most of her abilities that are actually good, and it gives her minus damage and minus speed. You can cleanse Winded by using her own abilities like upgraded Toe-to-Toe and Adrenaline Rush. Revelry by itself turns Hellion into the most consistent stress healer in the game. She has the fastest cooldown for it. It's also guaranteed to hit the entire party. It's fantastic, so if you just want to use her as a stress healer and just spam Revelry every other turn, you can do that. But Revelry gets more fun when you understand that Hellion can actually be a really good tank alongside being a damage dealer. Hellion has a few moves that are actually really good for tanking. Toe-to-Toe, especially upgraded, that clears Winded, that is fantastic, and then she has Adrenaline Rush and again Revelry to keep her alive. Adrenaline Rush is a really interesting move this time around. Once it's upgraded, it can clear any damage over time effect that's on her, which is really nice, but also it has the added benefit of clearing Winded tokens, and it gives her an interesting buff that when she deals damage after that, she heals herself. So this means between Toe-to-Toe to funnel damage into her and clear Winded tokens, and then you have Adrenaline Rush to clear Winded tokens and heal her, and then Revelry to heal your party and herself again with HP heal, means that Hellion has a very interesting role of being able to have all of this defensive strength, but then also hit something as powerful as Howling End, which is just basically Wicked Hack times 2, and she can hit that every other turn and then keep herself alive and keep Winded off of her. Oh yeah, and she also has the added benefit of her passive giving her an extra 25% damage bonus depending on how low her HP gets. I believe she gets it once at 50 and then again at 25%. So Hellion can have a bonus damage of 50% with a way to taunt and then keep herself alive. I think you're starting to see why this character can be nuts. Her ability to clear her own Winded tokens gives her a pretty interesting rotation. It's something like using Howling End when you want big damage after some setup, then using Toe-to-Toe to clear Winded, and then using her other moves like Adrenaline Rush to clear Winded again, or using Revelry pretty much on cooldown just to keep everyone's stress low. The reason having a rotation is pretty interesting for Hellion is because in Darkest Dungeon 1, I think we're starting to learn this with the sequel, is that in DD1, what you want to do is just hit a very high value move every single turn. So you want to hit Iron Swan and then like If It Bleeds and then Bleed Out or Wicked Hack with Hellion, and that's like your 3 or 4 turn fight. That's usually how it went for her. But in this, the fights are a bit slower and you have to strategize more with dealing with the enemy's defenses and stuff. So Hellion has this ability to take a turn to buff herself, you know, with one of her other abilities we've been talking about, and then just hit for a lot of damage with Howling End, and she doesn't really feel like she loses tempo for that. It's a bit harder to pull this off in road fights where you have the 5-round limit to clear it, but honestly that's more of an issue with road fights than it is with Hellion. So far I've alluded to Hellion's damage, but really I've talked about her support abilities, so she's able to tank, keep herself alive, and keep your stress down on the party. All of these things are fantastic, but even then, even alongside all of that, she's one of the best damage dealers out there. Highwayman can get some pretty insane numbers and action economy, which is pretty cool. Leper with Ruin can actually put out some really strong numbers, but Hellion doesn't take as much setup as the other characters. So really, as long as you have someone to drop a vulnerable token on the enemy, maybe give Hellion strength or a crit token from Jester or something like that if you want to go that way. You can have Hellion putting out some really good numbers. So far, I know that Hellion has gotten the highest recorded damage for me, up to, I think, 67 with a Howling End crit, which is pretty nice. I think Leper can get a bit higher, but either way, if you can do over 40 damage with an attack, you're doing fine. So it's actually pretty funny because when the game first came out, we thought that you just couldn't do damage, but it turns out that it just takes a bit more work to do really good damage, and you go from doing like 4 to 8, 5 to 10, or 6 to 12 or whatever, and then if you have the right setup, you can just break 40 with a crit pretty easily. The only real weakness to the Hellion playstyle is if she gets knocked out of position due to whatever happens in fights, because that does happen sometimes, but also if she has to deal with tokens she can't cleanse herself, like blind. You need someone else on the team to help her with that, or you need an item during battle. So sometimes you get blinded on your big damage turn, and that sucks. Same with getting weakened, that would also be very bad. But if you can avoid those situations, then Hellion's going to put out some respectable numbers. Unlike Darkest Dungeon 1, Iron Swan is not as imperative of a move to be pressing, so even though she has really good reach still, she just can't hit rank 3, so rip if it bleeds, although I guess, she plays differently this time. You still have Bleed Out alongside Howling End. Bleed Out is interesting because even if you have Winded on yourself, the bleed damage it does is really good, and it's still worth pressing. And then you have Bloodlust alongside of it to give you bonus damage against bleeding targets. Which means that even if you wanted to go a hyper damage route with Hellion, you could hit Bleed Out, and then Bloodlust, and then Howling End. This should blow up most enemies in rank 1. Hellion also has the benefit of being able to go on most teams, since she is pretty independent with this loadout that we've been talking about, of having Revelry and Adrenaline Rush and stuff, toe-to-toe upgraded, really good. So if you have Hellion on most teams, she can kind of fend for herself, which is really nice. I'm a big fan of characters that can be independent, so that's pretty cool. And the only real complaints I have about Hellion is the fact that pretty much her best moveset is locked behind the Hero Shrines. The Hero Shrines are very fun, don't get me wrong. You can get someone all their skills in 1 or 2 runs, depending on how lucky you are with scouting and such. That's really not that big of a deal, but it gives you the impression with her starting kit that she's not that good because it's just a bunch of mediocre damage and some okay reach. It also tries to tell you that she's a damage dealer, but then when you get all of her stuff and upgraded, she is able to provide a lot of party utility and become a self-sufficient tank. This is much different than how she played in the first game. Either way, I think it's pretty funny that Hellion went from a character most of us just thought was completely awful to, once you get these moves unlocked, she might, be in line for getting nerfed. It's hard to say. I'm not usually a fan of nerfs unless it's just blatantly ridiculous, like Ounce of Prevention. I'd rather people get buffs. But I know it's much easier to pull back what's out of line than it is to just buff everything else to match that. So if you're in the same camp that I was at the start of the game where Hellion isn't that good, try and get all of her moves unlocked, and then start running her as a tank support type of thing with the potential to do damage, and then see if your opinion changes. Alright y'all, that's gonna do it for this one. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, like I said, leave a like on the video, drop your thoughts down below in the comments, check out the box for all the cool links. Join Discord to talk to everyone and have a good time. I stream on Twitch 4 days a week. Use the Epic code. Join Patreon. All of that normal stuff that we talk about in all of the videos. Next up for videos, I'm going to do some playthrough stuff. And then also I want to do a starter tips video as well as a guide to all bosses. I want that to be about 10 minutes. It's going to be the lair bosses, not the final boss. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.